Admiral Tony Roberts stood on the bridge of the USV Defiance and watched as the Galactic Council fleet arranged itself in traditional battle formation around what they believed was the location of Earth. The alien ships moved with the precision of a military force that had never encountered serious resistance, their commanders following tactical doctrines that had remained unchanged for centuries. Enemy fleet is maintaining standard engagement protocol, reported Lieutenant Commander Kate Johnson from her position at the tactical console. They are broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies and waiting for our response. Roberts nodded grimly as he studied the tactical display. The Council fleet consisted of over 200 vessels, each one larger and apparently more powerful than anything in the human arsenal. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a hopeless battle for the defending forces. Communications. From Admiral Williams, announced the bridge communications officer. All human fleet elements are in position and ready for Operation Doorstep. Roberts activated the ship-wide communication system to address his crew. All hands, this is the Admiral. Today we face an enemy that believes they understand how warfare works in this galaxy. They are about to discover that human beings have some very different ideas about fighting. Captain Ryan Foster's voice came through on a secure channel from the Terra Nova, which had successfully escaped from Nexus Prime during the confusion following humanity's rejection of Council membership. Admiral, we have detailed intelligence on their ship designs and tactical preferences. Uploading data now. The information that appeared on Robert's tactical displays confirmed what human strategists had suspected. The Galactic Council fought wars like chess matches with formal rules and predictable moves. Their ship formations were elegant, but inflexible, designed for ceremonial battles between equally matched opponents who followed the same basic principles. Begin Phase 1, Roberts ordered. All stealth units, engage at will. Throughout the solar system, dozens of human ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and planetary rings began their attacks. These vessels were smaller than the Council warships, but they moved with unpredictable patterns and struck from unexpected angles. Admiral Kreetak's flagship immediately came under fire from 3 different directions as human ships materialized, out of what the aliens had assumed was empty space. The Krolex commander's response was exactly what human tacticians had anticipated. He ordered his ships to form defensive squares and engage the attackers in formal combat. Enemy is responding. As predicted, reported Johnson. They are trying to establish traditional battle lines. Roberts smiled coldly. Then let us show them what happens when you try to play by rules that your opponent does not recognize. The human fleet scattered in all directions, refusing to engage in the kind of set-piece battle that the Council forces expected. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, electronic warfare, and coordinated swarm attacks that left the alien commanders completely bewildered. Captain Alex Stone led a squadron of fast attack ships in a series of lightning strikes against the Council fleet's communication vessels. His ships would appear from behind cover, launch their weapons, and disappear again before the enemy could respond effectively. This is Stone to all units, he broadcast on the tactical frequency. Enemy command structure is breaking down. They cannot adapt to non-standard attack patterns. Dr. Carl Martinez's planetary defense systems added another layer of confusion to the battle. Earth itself seemed to flicker in and out of existence as the shielding technology created false targets and phantom readings that made it impossible for the Council forces to focus their attacks effectively. Lieutenant Commander Johnson coordinated. the human fleet's electronic warfare efforts from her position aboard the Defiance. Human computer systems had been designed to interface with alien technology, but the reverse was not true. Council ships found their weapons systems crashing and their navigation computers providing false information. Admiral, we are getting reports that several Council ships are requesting permission to surrender, announced the communications officer. Their crews appear to be in complete disarray. Roberts studied the tactical situation and realized that the battle was already over, even though it had barely begun. The Council fleet had been designed to fight other Council fleets using established procedures. When faced with an enemy that ignore, Ambassador Lisa Grant walked into the Galactic Council chambers with her head held high and her shoulders square. Behind her, Colonel Sullivan and Dr. Davis maintained professional composure despite the tension that filled the massive alien space. Lieutenant Brooks remained on the Terra Nova monitoring communications, ready to send word to Earth the moment things went wrong. High Chancellor Vextar waited on the central platform surrounded by representatives from dozens of alien species. The Krolex Empire delegation sat in positions of obvious importance, their massive armored forms making them look like living weapons. The Vorthon Collective occupied another section of high-status seating, their pale features showing the kind of arrogance that came from centuries of unchallenged authority. Ambassador Grant, Vexitar said with what passed for a smile among his species. I trust you have had sufficient time to review our generous membership offer. Your species should feel honored to receive such favorable terms. Grant stepped forward and activated the translation device that would ensure her words were understood by all the various alien languages represented in the chamber. She had practiced this speech during the long hours in their quarters, knowing that every word would be crucial. High Chancellor, representatives of the Galactic Council, I thank you for the time and consideration you have shown to humanity. Grant began formally. Your offer has been thoroughly reviewed by our government and our people. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien beings focused their attention on the human ambassador. Many of the junior member species looked nervous as if they suspected what was coming and feared the consequences. After careful deliberation, humanity must respectfully decline membership in the Galactic Council at this time, Grant announced clearly. We appreciate your offer but prefer to chart our own course among the stars. We wish the Council well in all its endeavors. The silence that followed her words lasted for several long seconds before an explosion of shocked voices filled the chamber. The junior member species looked terrified while the senior members appeared stunned by humanity's audacity. High Chancellor Vexitar raised one of his 4 arms to restore order to the proceedings. When quiet returned, his expression had changed, from diplomatic courtesy to something much colder and more threatening. I fear you do not understand the situation, Ambassador Grant, Vextar said with deadly calm. Species that exist within Council space are required to accept membership for the stability and security of all. This is not actually a request. Colonel Sullivan stepped forward slightly, his military bearing making his readiness for trouble obvious to everyone in the chamber. Dr. Davis remained where she was, but her hand moved closer to the emergency communicator. That would alert the Terra Nova if immediate extraction became necessary. I understand the situation perfectly, High Chancellor, Grant replied steadily. Humanity chooses independence over security, freedom over stability. We will make our own way in the galaxy. Admiral Kretok of the Krolex Empire stood up from his seat, his massive form towering over the other beings around him. His species had built their reputation on military conquest, and they were not accustomed to being defied by anyone, especially not by representatives of primitive worlds. You speak of choice, as if you have options. Kretok rumbled in a voice like grinding stone. Your pathetic little world sits helpless, while Council defense fleets protect your system from pirates and hostile forces. Remove that protection and see how long your independence lasts. Grant smiled slightly at this revelation. You mean the defense fleet that has been positioning itself around Earth for the past several weeks? The one that is supposedly there for our protection but is actually meant to enforce compliance with Council demands. The fact that humanity knew about the fleet clearly surprised the alien leaders. Vextar exchanged glances with several other senior members before responding. Since you are aware of our defensive arrangements, you should also understand that resistance would be futile, the High Chancellor said. Accept membership now, and your species can enjoy the benefits of galactic civilization. Continue to refuse, and face the consequences of defying established order. Dr. Davis activated her own translation device and spoke for the first time during the proceedings. Before we discuss consequences, perhaps the Council should verify that their defensive arrangements are still in place. This statement caused another stir among the assembled aliens. Several of them began checking communication devices, while others called for immediate status reports from their military commands. The growing alarm on their faces suggested that something was wrong with their carefully laid plans. Captain Foster's voice came through Grant's private communicator with a prearranged signal that meant everything was proceeding according to the contingency plans that Earth had developed. The Terra Nova was no longer the simple exploration vessel that it had appeared to be when they arrived at Nexus Prime. I believe your forces may be experiencing some difficulties, Grant observed calmly. Perhaps this would be a good time to reconsider the nature of our relationship. High Chancellor Vextar activated the Chamber's main communication system and demanded an immediate report from Admiral Kretok's command ship. The response that came back sent shocked murmurs throughout the assembled aliens. High Chancellor, we are unable to locate the human homeworld, came the voice of a Krolex military officer. Our sensors show empty space where their planet should be. All defense fleet units are reporting the same impossible readings. Grant allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Dr. Carl Martinez and his team back on Earth had exceeded all expectations with their planetary shielding technology. The Galactic Council's vaunted defense fleet was now staring at empty space, while Earth continued to exist safely in its hidden dimensional bubble. As I mentioned, humanity prefers to make its own arrangements for defense and security, Grant said pleasantly. We have found that relying on others for protection often leads to unpleasant obligations. Admiral Kretok was now shouting orders into his communication device, demanding that his subordinates explain how an entire planet could simply disappear. The panic in his voice was obvious despite the translation barriers. Colonel Sullivan stepped forward again and addressed the chamber directly. The Terra Nova came here as a diplomatic vessel, but we came prepared for other possibilities. Earth's government suspected that this meeting might not proceed as advertised. As if on cue, the Terra Nova's true capabilities began to reveal themselves. The ship's external appearance shifted as camouflaged weapon systems deployed and advanced. Defensive screens activated. What had looked like a peaceful exploration vessel was now clearly something much more dangerous. Impossible, breathed one of the Vorthon representatives. Our sensors showed no indication of advanced weapon systems. Human engineering tends to prioritize function over appearance, Dr. Davis explained. We also approach military technology from directions that other species apparently have not explored. The chamber erupted in chaos as various alien factions began arguing among themselves about how to respond to this unexpected development. The junior member species looked hopeful for the first time since Grant had arrived, while the senior members appeared to be struggling with concepts that challenged their understanding of how galactic politics worked. High Chancellor, Vextar called for order repeatedly before finally activating some kind of sonic suppression system that forced silence throughout the chamber. When he spoke again, his voice carried undertones of desperation disguised as authority. "This changes nothing," Vextar declared. "One small ship and one hidden planet cannot stand against the combined might of the Galactic Council. You have merely delayed the inevitable." Grant picked up her diplomatic credentials and prepared to leave the chamber. "Perhaps, High Chancellor, but humanity has decided that inevitable defeat while fighting for our principles is preferable to certain slavery while serving yours." As the human delegation walked toward the exit, Grant turned back one final time to address the assembled aliens. "To those species who might be interested in alternatives to council membership, humanity extends an offer of friendship and mutual cooperation. We believe the galaxy is large enough for multiple approaches to civilization." The last thing Grant heard before the chamber doors closed behind them was the sound of dozens of different alien languages all talking at once as the established order of galactic politics began to crumble around the Council's leadership. President Helen Murphy stared at the quantum communication display in the Situation Room beneath the White House and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The message from Ambassador Grant aboard the Terra Nova had arrived just hours ago, and its contents were more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. Instead of finding potential allies among the stars, humanity had discovered a cosmic protection racket. Admiral Scott Williams sat across from the president at the polished conference table, his weathered face showing the strain of the past few hours. As head of the Solar Defense Force, he had been preparing for this possibility since the alien message first arrived months ago. Now it seemed his preparations might be needed sooner than expected. "What exactly are our options here, President?" Murphy asked. "Grant's report makes it clear that refusing their offer could result in serious consequences for Earth." General Patricia Lewis consulted her tablet before responding. She commanded the Global Defense Council's Strategic Planning Division and had been working around the clock to analyze the threat assessment from the Galactic Council. "Based on the intelligence that Ambassador Grant has provided, we are facing a technologically superior force with apparently unlimited resources," Lewis reported. "However, there are some factors in our favor that they may not be aware of." Dr. Kevin Zhang looked up from his own stack of classified documents. As head of the Theoretical Physics Division, he had been overseeing several black projects that suddenly seemed very relevant to their current situation. "The aliens assume that our technological development follows the same pattern as other species they have encountered," Zhang explained. "They have observed our fusion drives and basic laser weapons, but they have no idea what we have been developing in secret." Admiral Williams activated the room's holographic display system and brought up a detailed overview of humanity's hidden military capabilities. The presentation that appeared would have surprised even many senior government officials who did not have the highest security clearances. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Project Prometheus," Williams announced. "For the past 15 years, we have been secretly militarizing our space infrastructure far beyond what any external observers would realize." The holographic display showed dozens of hidden military installations throughout the solar system, each one disguised as civilian research stations or mining operations. Weapons platforms disguised as communication satellites orbited every major planet, while entire fleets of warships waited in concealed bases among the asteroid belt. Our public space program has been deliberately designed to appear primitive and peaceful, Williams continued. Meanwhile, our actual military capabilities have been developing along completely different lines from what the Galactic Council expects. Engineer Maya Rodriguez joined the briefing via secure video link from the classified facility where she worked. Her team had been reverse engineering alien technology for years, using fragments recovered from various sources that the public never learned about. We have made significant improvements to their basic designs, Rodriguez reported. Human engineering approaches are apparently quite different from what they use. Where they prioritize elegance and efficiency, we focus on reliability and adaptability. President Murphy studied the information being presented and tried to process its implications. Are you telling me that we might actually be able to defend ourselves against this Galactic Council? General Lewis nodded confidently. More than that, Madam President, we might be able to win. Dr. Zhang brought up another set of displays showing theoretical combat scenarios. Human military doctrine is based on concepts that appear to be completely foreign to galactic civilization. They fight using formal fleet engagements with predictable tactics. We have developed asymmetric warfare, guerrilla strategies, and total war concepts that their hierarchical mindset cannot comprehend. Explain that further, Murphy requested. She needed to understand exactly what advantages humanity might possess. Galactic conflicts appear to follow ritualized patterns, Zhang replied. Fleet meets fleet, honor is satisfied, and the stronger force wins. They have never encountered an enemy that uses deception, misdirection, or unconventional tactics as primary strategies. Admiral Williams brought up tactical analyses from Grant's reports about the alien station. Their security arrangements are designed to prevent escape, not to repel invasion. They assume that anyone visiting Nexus Prime is either an ally or already defeated. The possibility of a small force causing significant damage simply does not occur to them. Maya Rodriguez added her own observations from the video link. Their technology is definitely advanced, but it is also standardized across multiple species. They seem to have adopted a one-size-fits-all approach to everything from weapons systems to ship design. That standardization creates predictable vulnerabilities. President Murphy walked to the window and looked out at the Washington skyline, while considering all of this information. Somewhere up there among the stars, Ambassador Grant and her team were sitting in alien quarters trying to decide humanity's future. The decision that Murphy made in the next few hours could determine whether the human race remained free or became servants to cosmic overlords. What about the other species in this Galactic Council? Murphy asked. Grant's report mentioned that many of them seem unhappy with their situation. General Lewis consulted her intelligence files. Several species appear to be looking for alternatives to council membership. If we could demonstrate that resistance is possible, we might find allies among the other junior member races. Dr. Zhang nodded enthusiastically. That is actually a crucial point. The council's power depends on maintaining the illusion that resistance is futile. If we can break that illusion, their entire system could collapse. Admiral Williams returned to his tactical displays. I recommend that we authorize Grant to reject their offer and begin immediate preparations for conflict. The longer we wait, the more time they have to position their forces against us. What about evacuation procedures? Murphy asked. If this goes badly, how do we protect civilian populations? Engineer Rodriguez spoke up from her video link. We have been developing planetary shield technology as part of Project Prometheus. Earth can be rendered effectively invisible to long-range sensors if necessary. Invisible, Murphy repeated. You mean they would not be able to find us? Correct, Rodriguez confirmed. The same principles they use for faster-than-light communication can be reversed to create a null space bubble around an entire planet. To outside observers, Earth would simply disappear. General Lewis brought up population distribution maps. We have also been secretly relocating critical infrastructure and key personnel to the outer colonies. If Earth comes under attack, our civilization can continue from bases throughout the solar system. President Murphy returned to her seat at the conference table and looked around at the faces of her advisors. These people had been preparing for this moment for years, developing technologies and strategies that could preserve human independence against overwhelming odds. How confident are you that we can actually succeed in this? She asked directly. Admiral Williams met her gaze steadily. Madam President, we have been preparing for asymmetric warfare against a technologically superior enemy for our entire careers. This is exactly the kind of challenge that human military thinking is designed to handle. Dr. Zhang added his own assessment. The aliens have made the classic mistake of assuming that all intelligent species think the same way they do. They have never encountered an enemy that approaches problems from fundamentally different angles. Maya Rodriguez provided the final piece of the puzzle. Their technology may be more advanced, but human innovation continues to accelerate while theirs appears to have stagnated. We are still learning and adapting while they are following ancient patterns. President Murphy made her decision. Send a coded message to Ambassador Grant. Tell her to reject their offer politely but firmly. Inform her that humanity chooses to chart its own course among the stars, and if they react badly, General Lewis asked. Murphy smiled grimly. Then we show them that humanity did not become the dominant species on Earth by accepting unfair deals from bullies. The room fell silent as the implications of this decision settled over everyone present. Humanity was about to take its first step into a larger universe, but it would be a step taken on their own terms rather than according to someone else's rules. The massive space station called Nexus Prime hung in the darkness like a metallic mountain. Lisa Grant watched through the Terra Nova's viewport as they approached the alien structure and tried to process what she was seeing. The station was easily 50 times larger than anything humanity had ever built, and its surface was covered with docking bays, communication arrays, and weapon systems that she did not recognize. Captain Foster guided their ship toward one of the smaller docking ports while maintaining constant communication with the station's traffic control system. The aliens had provided detailed approach instructions, but Foster was taking no chances with the safety of his crew and passengers. Docking sequence initiated, announced Lieutenant Brooks from his position at the communications console. They are directing us to Bay 17 on the lower ring. Colonel Sullivan stood near the rear of the bridge, studying tactical displays that showed dozens of other ships around the station. Most were of alien design, but he could identify a few that looked like they might have come from species similar to humanity in terms of technological development. Interesting mix of vessels out there, Sullivan observed. Some look very advanced while others seem more primitive, almost like they represent different levels of development. Dr. Davis had been analyzing the station's energy signatures since they arrived, and her findings were troubling. The power output from this facility is enormous. They could probably supply energy to an entire solar system from this single station. The implications are staggering. Grant listened to these reports while preparing herself mentally for the upcoming negotiations. She had reviewed every piece of information they had about galactic politics, which unfortunately was very little. Humanity was walking into this meeting almost completely blind. The docking procedure went smoothly, and within an hour they were walking through alien corridors, toward the main council chambers. Their escort was a tall, thin creature with blue skin and multiple arms who introduced himself as Assistant Administrator Kelvon. He seemed friendly enough, but there was something in his manner that suggested he was dealing with inferiors. "Your species shows great promise," Kelvon said as they walked. "The High Chancellor is quite interested in bringing humanity into the proper galactic order. You will find our membership requirements very reasonable." Grant noticed the phrase, "proper galactic order," and filed it away for future consideration. It suggested a very structured hierarchy among the various species, which could complicate negotiations depending on where humanity fit into that structure. The council chambers were impressive beyond anything Grant had imagined. A massive circular room with seating for hundreds of different species, all arranged in tiers that clearly indicated relative status and importance. The lower tiers near the center were occupied by elegant alien beings with elaborate ceremonial, clothing and obvious signs of wealth and power. High Chancellor Vextar was waiting for them on the central platform. He was a Zephyrian, according to their briefing materials, with pale green skin and large black eyes that seemed to look right through them. His ceremonial robes were covered with symbols that probably indicated his rank and authority within the galactic system. "Welcome, representatives of humanity," Vexatar said in a voice that somehow managed to sound both welcoming and condescending at the same time. "We are pleased to offer your species the opportunity to join our great civilization." Grant stepped forward and offered the traditional greeting that their xenology team had prepared. "Thank you for this invitation, High Chancellor. Humanity is honored to be considered for membership in your council." Vexatar gestured toward a set of documents that appeared on the holographic display between them. "These are the standard integration protocols that your species will need to follow. Nothing too complicated, just the basic requirements that all junior member races must fulfill." Sullivan moved closer to examine the documents, and Grant could see his expression darkening as he read. The requirements were indeed extensive and seemed heavily weighted in favor of the established council members. Humanity would be required to provide significant quantities of rare minerals, restrict their space exploration activities, and submit to regular inspections of their military capabilities. These terms seem rather one-sided, Grant observed carefully. She needed to voice her concerns without appearing to insult their hosts. All new species must prove their commitment to galactic stability before they can enjoy full membership benefits. Vextar replied smoothly. "These requirements have been refined over thousands of years and represent the most efficient system for integrating primitive civilizations into our advanced society." Dr. Davis had been quietly scanning the other species present in the chamber, and her observations were disturbing. Many of the beings in the lower tiers appeared malnourished or fearful, while those in the upper tiers showed clear signs of prosperity and confidence. The hierarchy was more than just ceremonial. Lieutenant Brooks had been monitoring communication frequencies since they arrived, and he was picking up some interesting signals. Most were in languages that their translation systems could not process, but the emotional undertones were clear enough. Many of the junior member species seemed to be discussing their situations in worried or desperate terms. "Perhaps we could discuss some modifications to these terms," Grant suggested. "Humanity has certain unique capabilities that might be valuable to the Council in different ways." Vexatar's expression did not change, but something in his eyes suggested that he was not pleased with this response. "The integration protocols are not subject to negotiation. They have been established through careful study of what works best for maintaining galactic peace and prosperity." Colonel Sullivan caught Grant's attention and nodded slightly toward the exit. He had obviously seen enough to know that this was not going to be the friendly partnership that humanity had hoped for. The power imbalance was too extreme, and the terms being offered were clearly designed to benefit the Council rather than the new members. "We will need some time to review these documents and consult with our government," Grant said diplomatically. "Such important decisions cannot be made hastily." "Of course," Vextar replied. "You have been assigned quarters on level 5 where you can consider our generous offer. Administrator Kelvon will show you the way and answer any questions you might have about life as a council member species." As they left the council chambers, Grant noticed that their assigned quarters were indeed on level 5, which appeared to be in the section of the station reserved for junior member species. The accommodations were adequate but clearly inferior to what the higher-ranking aliens enjoyed. Once they were alone in their quarters, Sullivan immediately began checking for surveillance devices while Brooks started monitoring local communication channels more aggressively. Dr. Davis pulled up the integration documents on her portable computer and began analyzing them in detail. "This is not good," Sullivan announced after completing his security sweep. "These quarters are definitely monitored and probably recorded. We need to be very careful about what we say here." Brooks looked up from his communication analysis with a grim expression. "It gets worse. I have been intercepting messages between some of the junior member species, and it sounds like several planets have been strip-mined for resources after joining the Council. The species that resist end up having serious accidents." Dr. Davis had reached similar conclusions from her analysis of the integration documents. These protocols are designed to extract maximum resources while providing minimum benefits. Any species that agrees to these terms will essentially become a tributary state. Grant absorbed this information while considering their options. They had come here hoping to find allies and trading partners, but instead had discovered a sophisticated protection racket operated by the more advanced species. Humanity was being offered a choice between submission and potential destruction. "We need more information before we make any decisions," Grant decided. "Brooks, keep monitoring those communications and see if you can learn more about what happens to species that refuse membership. Davis, analyze their technology signatures and see if you can determine their actual military capabilities." Sullivan nodded approvingly. "I will see what I can learn about their security arrangements and defensive systems. If this goes badly, we might need to leave in a hurry." Grant looked out through the small viewport in their quarters at the vast alien station surrounding them. Humanity had dreamed of joining a galactic community for decades, but this was not the community they had imagined. Now they had to decide whether to accept an unfair deal or risk the consequences of standing alone against overwhelming odds. Lisa Grant stared at the message display screen for the third time that morning and still could not believe what she was reading. The symbols on the screen looked strange, but the translation was clear enough. After 20 years of radio silence, from deep space, someone was finally talking back. The message was short and direct. It said humanity was invited to join something called the Galactic Council, and a ship would arrive in 6 months to collect their representative. Ambassador Grant had spent most of her career dealing with difficult negotiations on Earth, but this was something completely different. She walked across the command deck of the Terra Nova and found Captain Ryan Foster checking the navigation systems. The ship was humanity's newest and most advanced vessel, built specifically for deep space exploration. Foster looked up from his work when he heard her footsteps. "Still thinking about that message?" Foster asked. He had been just as surprised as everyone else when the alien communication arrived. The Terra Nova had been preparing for a routine mission to the outer colonies when everything changed. "How do we even begin to prepare for something like this?" Grant replied. She held up the datapad containing the translated message. "They want to meet at some place called Nexus Prime. They say it will be a formal introduction to galactic society." Foster nodded and returned to his instruments. "At least they seem friendly. The message was polite enough." Grant was not so sure about that, but she kept her concerns to herself. Something about the tone of the message bothered her, though she could not quite put her finger on what it was. The aliens had used phrases like adequate development level and suitable for junior status that sounded more condescending than welcoming. Dr. Amy Davis appeared at the entrance to the bridge, carrying a stack of research files. She had been working around the clock since the message arrived, trying to learn everything possible about the alien technology that had delivered it. Davis was one of Earth's leading experts on xenobiology, and her insights would be crucial for the mission. "I have some interesting findings about their communication method," Davis said as she approached. "The transmission used quantum entanglement principles that are far more advanced than anything we have developed. They are definitely ahead of us technologically." "How far ahead?" Grant asked. This was exactly the kind of information she needed to prepare for the negotiations. Davis consulted her notes before answering. "Based on the signal complexity and transmission method, I would estimate they are at least 200 years beyond our current capabilities. Maybe more." Colonel Jake Sullivan entered the bridge at that moment and caught the end of their conversation. Sullivan had been assigned as military advisor for the mission, and his experience with hostile negotiations would be valuable. He had spent years dealing with difficult situations in various conflict zones around Earth. 200 years is a significant gap, Sullivan observed. "We need to be very careful about how we approach this. Advanced technology usually means advanced weapons." Grant appreciated Sullivan's caution, but she also knew that humanity needed allies if they were going to survive in a galaxy full of other civilizations. Earth's population was growing, and they would need new worlds to colonize eventually. Making friends with the neighbors seemed like the smart approach. The message specifically mentioned trade opportunities and mutual defense agreements, Grant reminded them. "They seem interested in peaceful relations." Lieutenant Dan Brooks looked up from the communications station, where he had been monitoring deep space frequencies. Brooks was young, but he had excellent instincts when it came to reading between the lines of diplomatic messages. "Ambassador, I have been analyzing the signal patterns, and there might be more to this than meets the eye," Brooks said carefully. "The transmission was routed through multiple relay points before reaching us. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure we could not trace it back to its origin." Sullivan raised an eyebrow at this information. "Why would they hide their location if they are planning to meet with us anyway?" "Good question," Davis replied. "Maybe they are just being cautious." First contact protocols would naturally include security measures. Grant considered all of this information as she looked out at the stars through the bridge viewport. In 6 months, humanity would take its first step into a larger universe. The Terra Nova would carry not just her small diplomatic team, but the hopes and fears of the entire human race. Foster finished his system checks and turned to address the group. "Whatever their reasons, we need to be ready for anything. I have been working with engineering to upgrade our defensive systems and communications array. We will not be going into this meeting helpless." "What kind of upgrades?" Sullivan asked. "With professional interest. Better shields, faster engines, and improved weapons targeting," Foster replied. "Nothing too obvious, but enough to give us some options if things go badly." Grant nodded approvingly. She preferred diplomatic solutions, but Sullivan and Foster were right to prepare for other possibilities. The universe was a big place, and not everyone in it would necessarily be friendly to humanity. Dr. Davis gathered her files and prepared to leave the bridge. I will continue analyzing their technology signatures. If I can learn more about their capabilities before we meet, it might give us some advantages in the negotiations. Excellent work, Doctor, Grant replied. Keep me informed of any new developments. As the others left the bridge, Grant remained at the viewport watching the stars. 6 months seemed like a long time, but she knew it would pass quickly. There was so much to prepare and so many unknowns to consider. Humanity was about to discover whether they were alone in the universe or just very small fish in a very large pond. Foster remained on the bridge, making final adjustments to their course. "Nervous about the meeting?" he asked. Grant smiled slightly. "Nervous might be the wrong word. Cautious would be more accurate. We are walking into a situation where we know almost nothing about the other parties involved. That always makes negotiations more difficult." "At least we have 6 months to prepare," Foster pointed out. "That should be enough time to get ready for almost anything they might throw at us." Grant hoped he was right, but something in the back of her mind kept nagging at her. The alien message had been polite, but there had been an undertone of assumed authority that bothered her, as if the aliens already knew how the meeting would go and were just going through the motions of making it seem like a negotiation. She shook off these concerns for now and focused on the practical matters at hand. There would be time enough for worry later.